All right, so in the meantime, while we were sitting here talking, I had Tim print me off a shirt. And what I did is I put an extreme amount of pretreatment at the top of the garment and no pretreatment down at the bottom. And I also only pressed half of the shirt. All right, so let's see what we're looking at here. So if you notice, the top of the shirt's really pretreated hard. All right, and then the bottom, it just kind of sucks into the shirt. So if you look at this, over here where I had the extreme amount of pretreatment, it's nice and smooth, all right? No little flakes or anything like that. But over here on the side that I did not press, I've got little white speckles everywhere, okay? Those little white speckles and stuff like that, that's basically the fuzz sticking up, right? And then they get painted with white, and then color comes down, that fuzz is still sticking up. And then when you cure it, it folds over, leaving the little white speckles everywhere. But then once you get down here towards the bottom, you notice that the pre-treat just starts, or the ink just starts sucking into the shirt to the point where it's actually going into the back of the shirt. You can actually see some of that white ink coming through. All right? So no matter what, if you do not have enough pre-treatment on your garment, I don't care how many times you try to print the layer over and over again, it will never look like it was pressed. Okay, so those are just some things to keep in mind. All right, so now let's prep up a shirt like we're going to do it normally. All right, so we're going to go to the Anvil 980 real quick. All right, and the general settings, somewhere between a 3 and about an 8, depending on your humidity levels and things like that. I know there's a lot of variables that go into proper pre-treating, environmental issues, if your spray tip's going down and stuff like that, but you do need to do some testing on your end to make sure that your shirts and in your office are printing properly. All right, so from here, I'll place my shirt up here. Make sure it's nice and flat. And I'm going to start with a setting of, I'll just do about 5.5, okay? So when I hit start, I make sure that it's going all the way down the shirt. I'll hit my button. But then I need to look at the shirt to let it show me what the stuff is doing. So let me bring the camera a little bit closer over here. Sorry, guys. Okay, as you can see, the fuzz starts to show up on the shirt. If I put my hand on it, it's a little bit damp. You can actually see it. But it's physically wet on top of the shirt. So if I put this immediately on my heat press right now, what it would do is glaze it over like a donut. Okay, it would look like a Krispy Kreme donut. Meaning, because you're flash frying that pre-treatment, it's heating up too fast and it's turning into a solid. So how do we get rid of that? Okay, there's a couple different ways. All right, one, you can use a foam roller. All right, there's these dense foam rollers. So when I pre-treat that, it goes down. You notice it evens out the pre-treatment and spreads it evenly and gets up any kind of excess that's up on top of the fabric. Or another technique is taking a separate piece of release paper. Let me get some of this dust off of here. And you can just place it right on top of the garment and just spread your hands out like this. So that way it pushes that pre-treatment that's on the surface into the garment. All right. Then if it still seems physically wet, like it would smear or something like that, let me see if I can show you, where it's really kind of just wet looking, what I'll need to do is hover the heat press for probably about anywhere from 30 seconds to probably even a minute if necessary to let that pre-treatment diffuse into the cotton and basically get it so that way it's not going to be that glazed look. Okay. So we'll go over here to the heat press. All right, so I'll go ahead and flip this in here. All right, and then I will hover it. So on these Geonate heat presses, you notice it has this little bar that hangs down here. That little bar is the hover feature. So, and it has the electromagnet, which is the silver magnet back here in the back. So to hover it, all I do is go down and touch that little bar. and then it holds it without it actually touching the garment. There's probably about a ½ inch space between the garment and the actual heat surface. So what that does is diffuse that pre-treatment. Or that's just the word I choose. So it might not actually be doing that. All right, so about 30 seconds, I pop that up. You'll notice a little bit of steam coming off of there, but it does not look shiny wet anymore. All right, so you'll kind of get like a dark look to it, the dark square, but it won't actually be physically wet and shiny. All right, but I didn't actually press it. So after that 30-second hover, to make sure that it's not saturated wet on top of the fabric, I'll take a piece of my release paper, use a different one than that you did from smoothing it out over on the Spider Mini. Make sure it's clean. All right. And then I only have to press it for about 10 or 15 seconds. It doesn't need a whole lot of pressure. But the biggest thing, and this is the cardinal rule of pre-pressing, is what happens after I pop this up. All right? So if I pop this up and you notice that that paper kind of floated away, if it had stuck to the garment, then I would need to peel it off completely, put the paper back down, and repress it for another 5-10 seconds. Basically until that paper floats off of it like it's not even touching. Because that peeling action that you do with the paper, what that does is you've got fuzz that's laid down, so now as you peel it, it peels it right back up. So now you got that fuzz, it gets painted with white, now you got little white speckles all in your image. Alright, so that is a properly pre-treated shirt. Alright, so you notice that it's not glossy down here at the bottom or anything. It's basically just dry. You will have a press line, just like with any other heat press, just in case you like have ever ironed or anything like that. But this is nice and smooth and it's ready to print.